I'm just going to start at the beginning. Richard, welcome to the show, and thanks for coming to Austin.
Tim, I'm honored to be here. It is very much my pleasure.
And I was mentioning this before we started recording. I have had you at the top of my list for people I want to spend time with because I find just about everything about you fascinating and I've wanted to ask so many questions. And I thought we would start maybe in a place that would be unexpected for people listening. I'm not going to start way at the beginning. In childhood, we'll probably get there. But let's start with the Magic Castle. What is the Magic Castle?
The Magic Castle is to magic what the Grand Ole Opry is to country western music. It's the premium place for magicians to perform around the world. And they have what is the equivalent of the Oscar, the Academy of Magical Arts Awards, AMA Awards. And it's a 27,000 square foot Victorian mansion built in 1907. And you go in, it's strictly for adults, 21 or over, must have ID. Back to the old days, you have to have coat and tie. You cannot overdress. If you're underdressed, they don't let you in. They don't like what you dressed, they don't let you in. And it's by invitation only. But it's just a very, very fun venue and place to perform. I just got returned from performing at the castle night before last. I just flew in last night.
You have one of the busiest schedules I've ever heard of, and I've met some very, very driven, busy people. The Magic Castle has been this vision in my head, or it was, I should say, for many years, and I had the opportunity to go there for the first time just last year with a member, and it just blew my mind to see the variety of skill and the level of skill in the various rooms, because there are these different rooms for different performers and different types of performances. Could you speak to, and I hope I'm getting this name right, Dai Vernon?
Oh yes, you got it right.
So who is Dai Vernon, and how did you first meet?
Well, Dai Vernon, first of all, was born in 1894. He lived to be over 98 years old. My wife, my beautiful wife, Kim, and I threw him his 98th birthday party 2 months before he passed away. And he was known as the man who fooled Houdini. And that took place 100 years ago this year.
Wow.
100 years ago. And Houdini had a boast that if he saw the same trick 3 times, he could figure it out. Vernon did it for him 5 times, couldn't figure it out. And so he was known as the man who fooled Houdini, and for over a half a century, he was the best in the world with a deck of cards. And there's different types of magic. There's the big, what we call furniture movers, the big illusionists, and most of those things, that type of show is really money more than talent. You just have to pay $200,000 to buy this big illusion that turns a cat into a person, inside of a cage or whatever. And then there's the parlor magician where the link rings and make eggs come out of their mouth or whatever, something along those lines, where a smaller audience, but that's called parlor magic. Then there's the close-up magician who will do stuff right in front of your eyes, like they'll make coins jump from one hand to the other, or they'll do card tricks. But the most difficult of all forms of sleight of hand is the work for the card table, the gambling work. And that work is the most closely guarded information of all sleight of hand. Nowadays with the internet, just about everything is exposed. And Vernon, wanting to know more about the moves of the gamblers, first read a book written in 1902 called Expert at the Card Table by S.W. Erdnase. And nobody knows who Erdnase was. And at that time, the magicians, the 19-teens and 20s, we don't care about that book. That stuff's too hard to learn. And Vernon had it mastered by the time he was like 12 years old. And so he spent his life hunting down hustlers. He's the first one that found Alan Kennedy in 1930-31, who supposedly could deal cards from the middle of the deck, which no one thought that was possible. And so that information was the most closely guarded pieces of sleight of hand that you can get a hold of if you get a hold of it. He had passed it on just special people like Charlie Miller and a few others. And I met him in 1975. I'll tell you a quick backstory. Kind of funny.
It doesn't have to be quick. But
Okay.
Please go ahead.
I was working with a guy named Bob Yerkes, Yerkes. He was just at my show on Sunday. He's going to turn 87 next month. He's been in stunts. He's been in stunt business for 73 years. His first movie was in 1947 with Elizabeth Taylor, and he's doubled everybody under the sun. Literally thousands of stunts on television, thousands of stunts in film. Like in the movie Towering Inferno, or Earthquake. He died 7 times in Earthquake. Died multiple times in Towering Inferno, and on and on. He was on the movie recently with Tom Hanks on Angels and Demons. He was the minister that was being burned alive, and they forgot to turn the fan on to blow him out. And Tom Hanks says, well, at least he didn't have to act, because he wasn't acting. He was screaming, turn the fan, I'm hot. Anyway, so I was working with him. We were training, it was a show called Circus of the Stars, where we trained celebrities to do circus acts. And I was, for better or worse, I'll just call him his gopher. And but I lived with him, and he's a dear, dear, dear friend, has been for almost 50 years. And so we were training for the Circus of the Stars and a Linda Carter show called Wonder Woman. And Dai Vernon heard I could do some very difficult moves with the cards. I just turned 21, and I was going to meet him at the Magic Castle. And I found out the night before I had to have a suit to get into the castle. At that time, I couldn't afford a suit. I didn't have a suit. And so I thought, okay, I had my gambling money. I always had at that time, stacks of 20s, which was a lot of money for me. And so I went to the Northridge Shopping Center, set my deck of cards on a coat rack, started thumbing through coats. The sales guy comes up to me and says, I'll cut you high card for that coat. And I thought to myself, this is my lucky day. I said, okay, I'll go for that. And he backs out and said, no, I'm just kidding. And I said, tell you what, I took out 2 2s and a queen. I said, come over to your desk here. I moved him, and I said, if you tell me where that queen is, I'll pay double for the coat I picked out. If you get it wrong, you give it to me for free. And he goes, really? And I said, really? Well, I threw those cards, and darn if you didn't miss it. I said, tell you what, I'll bet the coat against a pair of pants. Give you a chance to get your coat back. And he goes, okay. Lost again. I said, tell you what, coat pants against a shirt and tie. He said, okay, but this is the last one. And he lost again. So I walked out of there with a brand new suit, didn't pay a dime. And if I would have known he was going to go for it, I wouldn't have picked out the cheapest coat in the place. It was a tan corduroy piece of crap that I still have today, because it's how I first met Vernon. And so I still have it as a souvenir. But anyway, so I get to the castle, and Vernon, there was 2 guys in the room. Dai Vernon, this was in the library, which was separate, closed off to the public. And another guy named Tony Giorgio, who's best known as the actor in the movie Godfather. He played Bruno Tattaglia, which was Vito Corleone's toughest henchman. And there's a scene in the movie where a guy takes a knife and stabs his hand to the bar. Yeah. The guy with that knife, that was Tony Giorgio.
That's Tony.
And he was a bust-out man back in the 40s and 50s.
What does bust-out man mean?
A bust-out man is somebody who a casino will have on hand. Oh, hey, that's Tim Ferriss. He's got some money. Okay, Tony, take him out fast. So a bust-out man means they're going to take you down. They're going to take you down quick, get that money from you. Or if it turns out that, man, that Tim Ferriss, he was just too lucky. Okay, Joe, you're out of here. Tony, you're in. Get that money back.
And getting back
means bust you out fast.
Using card techniques?
Yeah, using sleight of hand, using card techniques, exactly. Gambling moves, whatever his artifice was. Probably in that case, a peek with a second deal. And
say that one more time?
A peek. In other words, he would peek the top card, or know what the top card is, and then he would deal the card under the top card. So you can see that card on top. What's that card?
That's 5 of hearts.
Okay. And as he would deal to the other players, see, that top card is not moving. And for those that can't see what we're doing, I'm dealing the cards in slow motion, and the top card is not moving as the second card comes out. But it looks as though it's the top, and like here's even with one hand. And of course, when the card's face down, I turn it face down. Yeah. Now you're watching, and you can't tell that you've been swindled. So he would take him down, and so then he became an actor in the 60s. Yeah. And anyway, so at the table was Dai Vernon and Tony Giorgio. And Giorgio was, he was about 6'4", mean, nasty mafia hitman. I always used to say he never had to act; he just played himself. Mean, nasty mafia hitman. And because we had battles for altogether 38 years, but we battled each other for 20 years. And at first I was no threat, but anyway, I'm showing Vernon my moves, and Vernon goes, "Well, now that's all right, but I don't care how fine you breathe. When you're moving your hand like that, it's unnatural. It tips you off." And every time I did anything, Giorgio, Kippenstein from the other table, not involved in our little private get-together, would yell, "Won't get the money, won't get the money." And then I'd show him something, "Won't get the money, won't get the money."
What did he say? Won't get the money.
Won't get the money. Well, not get the money, but it was won't get the money, which is, in other words, it's not good enough for the card table. And so,
so that is sort of sleight of hand smack talk. That is
smack talk. Won't get the money.
That is like your mama type of line at the card table.
Exactly. Right. Won't get the money. You get a double banger. You shot twice. And so, but Vernon, then I showed him the move I just showed you, and that technique, he thought that was kind of clean because it wasn't more natural. And so I remember what he said, and I went home and I practiced what he said. I don't care how much you move your hand, no matter how fine that brief is, it's unnatural action. So naturalness, and that's what I learned from Vernon, naturalness. You have to be natural in your execution. And so I practiced it, and the next time he saw me, he goes, "Now that's better, that's better." And he took a liking to me because he would see that I would put in, I practiced at that time, and and it's not an exaggeration, even though I almost wish it was, because I would practice average of 14 hours a day. That was my average time practicing. But sometimes it might be only 10 hours because I spent extra time in the gym because I was training for some kind of a fight. Or other days I got up at 6 in the morning, went to bed at 3, and I may have practiced 20 hours that day. But my average practice time was 14 hours. And that was sustained for 26 years, 7 days a week. And Vernon saw this obsession in me, and so he took me on as a student protege. And to cut to the chase, I became the recipient of a century worth of his most guarded card table artifice, techniques that he traveled the world, finding down these hustlers and learning their moves. And I still have things today that only he and I know, and I've created things today that only he and I know, and he's not telling anybody. I think it was Benjamin Franklin said, 3 people can have a secret, but you have to kill 2 of them.
So, if we talk about your practice, because your practice and work ethic, it struck me when I first saw Dealt. It struck me as I've done homework in preparation for this meeting. What makes good practice? Because there are people who practice a lot, they put in a lot of hours, but their skills don't improve or improve much. So what makes good practice for you?
Very, very, very good question, Tim. First of all, I say practice does not make perfect. So they say practice makes perfect. No, practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Right.
You can practice something wrong when you're done, it's perfectly wrong. And I see it in my industry all the time. They'll practice a second deal in some awkward fashion where the most common one is a strike second, and I'll give a visual clue picture. The card is turned face up on the deck. They'll hold, first of all, usually they hold the deck in a real tight, what's called a mechanic's grip, or a real deep grip, and I'll lighten up the grip a little bit. And then when they go to take the card, they'll bypass the card they're taking so they can hit the second card and deal it out. And this is the standard second deal that you'll see people do, but it has all kinds of tells.
It has a lot of tells.
First of all, you're pushing the top card over to receive it with the other hand. So why is the right thumb bypassing the left thumb? And this because so they has exposure of the top of the deck where that second card is to get a hold of it. That is a totally unnatural action, but you'll see it all the time. And then you don't have a dead deck. One of Vernon's students, and who became a peer of Vernon's, was a guy named Charlie Miller, who I had the privilege of spending time with. And they grew up all through the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And Miller talks about a dead deck. When you're dealing the top card, everything below it, there's no movement. And so if there's movement being made when you're taking the second card out and the top card is going back, you don't have a dead deck. You have movement of two different movements. The second card coming out, the top card going back. Now watch my second deal. There's no, I'm not crossing the thumbs at all, and my left thumb is, there's no leaking of the card at the other corner, and I'm not going anywhere near the top of the deck. And this, that particular second deal, I have practiced. Well, I've done it in front of a live audience about 5 million times, and in practice, I've done it over 100 million times, that one move. And I proclaim, or I say that it's probably the most difficult move in all of sleight of hand, because there's only 2-3 other people that are getting it down, and one guy's been working on it after he watched my videos for 30 years now, and but it just takes a long time. But anyway, get off track. Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Same thing with in the martial arts. You know, you throw a side kick. You know, the people they'll swoop the kick up as they go. You lift it and you shoot it in like a blade. Like a piston. You practice it wrong. You sit there practicing it wrong. When you're done, it's not wrong. It's perfectly wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's another thing I like to say. Discipline breeds discipline. They say, how do you put in time? And when I'm telling people when they want to train or something, I say, the more you do something, the more you can do of it. Discipline breeds discipline. You do something, and then the more you're able to do it, and the better you do it. And then they say, well, I just can't run a marathon. I say, don't run a marathon. Right now, I want you to just walk down the distance of 2 houses and walk back. Make it so easy, you can't talk yourself out of it. Right. The next day, walk the distance of 3 houses, come back. Then the next day, jog down the distance and come back. And then eventually, your body starts adapting to the habit, and those endorphins start getting released. And then after a certain period of time, it's like, will you get back in the house? Does it have to be a marathon? You know, so discipline breeds discipline.
I love that.
Perfect practice makes perfect.
So let's talk about your physical practice, the training. And I have so many notes here in front of me. It's an embarrassment of riches. As I have written down here, CBS producer David Rubin, Turner's life story is too incredible for fiction, and there's a lot to that statement we'll get back to. You mentioned the stunt work. You've flown on a trapeze, tightrope walks. You have
high falls.
Yeah, high falls. You've done
cliff diving.
You've done an incredible amount of physical cultivation, and I have a line here. So on March 5th of this year, you will have not missed a workout in 49 years.
True.
All right. Why is training important to you? Why would you go to the trouble, as I have down here? In the 70s, there were no gyms when you were on tour, so you traveled with a wooden briefcase with 120 pounds of weights inside. Sounds like a workout in and of itself. Why is it so important to you?
Well, part of it is when I was growing up, I was always the second smallest or second smallest in my class. And I would get beat up, or I'd get pushed around. And then we watched, and then we haven't really got off on this point yet.
Yeah.
At 9 years old, I started losing my sight.
Right.
My sister Lori, who I call my genius sister because she's brilliant, and we both got scarlet fever. I was 9, 1963, she was 5. And that caused, for me, within a matter of moments, I'm 4th grade watching this chalkboard, and all of a sudden, it just went blurred. It was like someone took the chalkboard and smeared the chalk.
It was that sudden.
It was that sudden. And the same thing with my sister. 1 minute, she went from full sight to legally blind. And so now we were forced in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade to watch a movie called Lord of the Flies. And I, to this day, don't know why they made kids watch a horrifying movie like that. And what it was about was a group of kids stranded on an island, and a group of boys. They were all like between probably 8 to 12 years old, somewhere in that age frame. And there was one boy called Piggy. And he was a chubby boy, and he had to wear glasses, and he had asthma. And they found out that they could use his glasses to make a fire. And because he was chubby, they called him Piggy. And so he was picked around, and he had asthma. And then when at 10 years old, I found out that I had asthma. All of a sudden, I'm just deathly sick because we were very poor. Our house literally was a structure sat on a ditch, about a 6-foot ditch. And my dad poured concrete down in that ditch to make my bedroom. And during the winter, my bed would have 4, 5, 6 inches of water under it, which means molds. And I was definitely allergic to molds. And I would just get extremely ill. And so now I'm blind, had asthma, and I was skinny. He was chubby. Piggy was blind asthma, and he was chubby. And so I thought, I don't want to be a piggy. I don't want to be a coward. And I was afraid I was going to be a coward because I was afraid. And I was afraid of getting beat up. And I was afraid when I'm walking down the street, a guy named Leland, picks a fight with me and I get hurt. Doug Ferguson beat me up and others. Anyway, so I didn't want that. And then there was another show that affected what kind of caused me to go off the charts the other direction, was called Lost in Space. And there was a little boy on there, Billy Mummy, played Will Robinson. And there was the man on the show, Dr. Smith, who was the man, the coward, hiding behind a rock while this goofy-looking monster made out of paper mache would come walking up, and Billy Mummy would save the day, the little kid. And I thought, he's brave, and I was afraid of turning out like Dr. Smith. And then the third thing was Tarzan movies. You'd see them walk across a tree spanning 2 cliffs that maybe 100 feet down, 1,000 feet down. And then there was always the guy that would turn around and say, whatever you do, don't look down. And then the next guy would be, the coward would look down and go screaming to his death. And I was afraid I'd be that coward that would look down and panic and fall down. So I started just taking things to the outer limits as far as pushing myself. And growing up there, I had three movies on the other side that affected me. One was Ben-Hur, starring Charlton Heston. There's a scene in the movie where he's pulling the oars with his big bulging biceps, and that image of strength, made me want to be stronger. I want to be strong. I want to be strong like him. And another one was The Green Hornet, starring Bruce Lee as Kato. And and I thought, I want to kick like Kato. And the third one was the one that really probably set my life on fire was James Garner in Maverick. He was the cool, slick gambler, and I wanted to be a card shark. Anyway, so those are the 3 things, but that's really what started me off on taking things to the extreme. Whatever someone else did, whatever they benched, I was going to bench more. Whatever their split was, I got to where I could do a 200-degree split. In fact, there's even video out there. I'm stretched across 2 chairs, and I'll touch my head to the floor. And so anyway, I just had this thing of whatever someone else did, I had to top it. Not that I was able to top everybody, which I was not, but the top people in the top 1%, and I've trained with some very world-class athletes. And I either trained them or trained with them, and people had a hard time, be frank, keeping up with me.
Well, I mean, you're still an extremely fit guy. You told me before we started recording that you worked out at 5 this morning. Yeah,
well, and you understand this because you're an athlete yourself. That's another thing I do, because it wakes me up. It gets the adrenaline going, the endorphins shooting, and because I had shows all week last week, every day, and I flew in last night at 9 p.m. and I thought, okay, I need to be on my best game because I'm meeting Tim Ferriss and we're going to be talking for 2 hours, and my voice was already worn from all the shows I've done. And what's the best way? The first person says, rest, relax, get ready. I was in the gym, and then all of a sudden I started at 5, and it's 11 minutes after 7. I've been in here for 2 hours and 11 minutes. My ride's going to be here in 49 minutes. Dash to the down 2 fish tacos that my wife made. She makes the best fish tacos anywhere on the planet, my wife Kim. And I down those things and then shower, and here we are.
And here we are. And as you mentioned, we hadn't covered and hadn't talked about sighted or the other CBS, is it
Charles Bonnet syndrome?
Charles Bonnet syndrome.
That's French. In English, it's Charles Bonnet syndrome.
Especially in Texas.
Yeah.
And I didn't bring it up earlier very deliberately because I want people to understand that your incredibly deft technical mastery of what you do stands on its own head-to-head against anyone, period, full stop. So I wanted to make that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's true. And that's certainly been recognized by many people. And I certainly want to chat about the Charles Bonnet syndrome, but I didn't want to lead with it. Mm-hmm. But since it came up, we chatted very briefly about this before we started recording. Could you please talk to me about the red and blue spectrum? Because I've heard you, I've read you say that you can see things, or you see things that other people don't see. And I'd love to just know what your sort of experience of reality is like.
My world that I live in.
Your world.
Yeah. First, let me explain what CBS, Charles Bonnet syndrome, is first documented in 1760 by Charles Bonnet. And it's a very rare condition. And Dr. Oliver Sacks, he's a best-selling author, and I'm sure
amazing author.
Yes, I'm sure you're familiar. He has 2 books, one called Hallucinations, the other one called The Mind's Eye, where he goes into specifics on CBS. And he's probably documented more cases than anybody. And up till 1990, there was only 6 documented cases. And then he's found a few.
Only 6 up to 1990.
1990, And then he's documented a few others. And I'm the most extreme case on the planet. Most people, first of all, let's kind of give you a picture view of what CBS is, Charles Bonnet. And that's where a person that's blind and should see nothing will see sporadic colors or splatters or pieces of images or just some visual things, almost like hallucinations.
Right.
And they're sporadic. In my case, it's 100% 24/7, and it's not just part of my vision. I see a 160-degree kaleidoscope of beautiful, vivid colors, patterns, shapes, every subconscious image you could imagine. And I don't see them in the back of the brain like when you're dreaming or imagining. I look at them, I see them in front of me, I see them in external space, just like you're seeing me in external space.
They're like an object that you perceive.
There's something, I'm looking at it. Right now I'm in the blue spectrum. And to explain the difference between blue and red, I have a neuroscientist that was doing some interviewing me for some projects and stuff. And he said the red spectrum, which is more geometric shapes, everything is, first of all, there's a grid. And it's usually a grid like layers of bricks, and they're always perfectly aligned, and they're perfect rectangle bricks laid out just like a brick
This
building.
is in the red or in
This
both?
is the red.
This is the red.
Okay. And then it's always maroon, which is my favorite color. One of my favorite colors, the red spectrum. So the brick, what would be the gray mortar, is actually maroon. And then the red bricks, and in those bricks are every geometric shape, circles, squares, triangles, stars, just every geometric shape you can imagine. And in those shapes will be every subconscious image that's floating around in my brain. Okay, that's the red spectrum. He said if I remember, that's the lower part of the brain. And then the blue spectrum, which is, I call it the right brain, the analytical. The other is the blue spectrum, which is very artistic. There's no it's totally random. If you picture, I call it like breaststrokes. I like breaststrokes. Yeah. Well, but there's
both.
only 2 breasts that I'm allowed to stroke. And they belong to Kim. Okay. And I don't want any slaps from you? No? Okay. So
all good.
Brush strokes is
brush strokes. Yeah.
I guess you can see where my mind is right now. I just got in a week away from my beautiful wife. Okay. So I did to get brush strokes.
It's okay. I've been making Freudian slips all week.
The more Freudian, the better it is.
So in the blue, you have these brush strokes.
Brush strokes, and then royal blue to turquoise blue to sky blue to emerald green to lime green, all the way down that spectrum. And they're just random strokes, and then floating around is, like I said, every subconscious image you can imagine. And just picture yourself underwater in a pool with the light coming in and the light spectrum breaking down like a prism.
Right.
Breaks down the light spectrum. So all these colors just floating around, and all the images are two-dimensional, but they're layered three-dimensionally, if you can picture that. So
they're like panes of glass.
Yes, it just back and forth, depth, forward, and the thing about it is I can take any particular image, and I won't get slapped, but she might go again. And I can take a picture of an image of my beautiful wife in her bikini, and I can take it, zoom it in, rotate it, or where I use it most is if I'm designing. I've designed and built my own homes, or like a patio deck. And my wife Kim will tell you, I'm sitting in my chair and I'm watching in full 3D, like virtual reality. I basically live in virtual reality. And so my spectrum is my own computer. So I want to design a deck, and I built this 3-level deck, and I would say, okay, I need 4x12s, post down 4x12 across there, and then up 2x6s. They'll anchor in there, and you'll watch me looking back and forth, engineering this giant project with 1,000 cuts. It was 3 levels, stairway, hanging swings, built-in flower beds, and without a single piece of paper. Then I'd tell my dad, okay, he was my cutter. I said, this board has to be 192 1/4 inches. And my dad is a genius. My dad was he was one of my role models. But I can't tell him or my wife what I'm going to do because I can't explain 1,000 cuts. Yeah. What I'm doing is just all in here. And so then we'd start putting it together, and then he'd watch this whole thing come together. He goes, now I understand what you were talking about doing. So that's one of the ways that I use it. And probably the thing I use it mostly is like I want to remember a phone number. I can write the number down in the air. I'll see it floating in the air, just like you'd see it on a computer screen. My mind takes a picture of it, and I have what's called an eidetic memory, and then I just files away. Wow. And I bring it back up. Or when I'm practicing with cards, and I do this every time I'm at a restaurant, or when I'm people, and I'll have the table, and I'm watching the move, and I'm analyzing something I'm doing, and I'll see it, and my mind will create the image, and it's not flesh like you have. Right. It's more of a conglomeration of all kinds of geometric shapes or images to create the image of an arm, right. The image of the cards. So it's not flesh and blood colored the same way you would see it. But I will see the image of the constructed within my mind, what I'm looking at. And then I'll analyze it, and I'll see everything going on. Yet there's a solid object between me and what I'm looking at. Right. But yet here's the interesting thing: if I turn like this, can't do it.
If you turn your head.
If I turn my head, I have to be looking at the object. Like my medicine cabinet is an example. I have a friend who's a writer. He thought this was interesting. My medicine cabinet, I'm going, where is that Campbell-Phenique? Okay, and I can see everything in my medicine cabinet. I'm going down, there it is. And I'm seeing everything, yet the door's closed. Right. Okay. But now if I turn this way, I have to see it by mind. I can't see it in front of me.
Oh wow!
Isn't that kind of interesting?
That's fascinating.
But anyway, so I consider it a real blessing that I have this strange condition, and because I use it all the time. Yeah. And like I said, I consider myself very, very blessed, and within seconds, I can shake someone's hand, and usually I can tell their height, weight, characteristics about them, and my mind will create an image of what I think they look like. And sometimes I'm totally out in left field, but it'll create my own impression of that person. And then when they're talking, I will see some strange-looking conglomeration, mouth moving, even though it's not necessarily flesh-colored, or flesh-looking or human-looking.
But it's a representation.
But it's a representation of movement and motion.
Well, if you think about it, also, for those people who are sighted, I mean, what they are perceiving, they consider reality, but they have their own lens, you have your own lens, and they're both representations in a way, if that makes sense. And I wanted to ask a few follow-up questions with the eidetic memory, the photographic memory. Is that something that you had partially or fully before losing your sight, or is it something that was developed over time, a bit of both?
It was something I had beforehand. I remember when I was 5 years old in kindergarten, and we were finger painting class. And I had a picture of a National Geographic image that I saw of a seascape. And so all these other kids are just doing their finger painting, their nose and their ears and their hair and their table, and I come up with this seascape. And to this day, what is it, 60 years later, so over 60 years later, I can still see the exact thing that I created 60 years later. And it was, start off with the ground, and then I had seaweed. No, sorry, I touched your deck.
I forgive you.
Okay, and seaweed going up, and there would be in this corner I had a jellyfish with the things coming down, and a shark in the middle, and just different things that I replicated from an image I saw in a National Geographic book, and so from ages 5, 6, 7, 8, I was the best artist in the school. And I could, like I said, see a picture and I could pretty much replicate it. And then the problem, and then when I, 9 and I had scarlet fever, then I started losing that ability to paint and draw.
That must have been really difficult, I would imagine. I mean, how?
That was very difficult, and that was probably where some rebellion took place. I was shipped off to a special school where they had what was called a VH room back then, visually handicapped. And now you say visually impaired, politically much more polite than visually handicapped. And I hated the word handicapped, and I despised the word blind when I was, had to go to the school. And my sister Lori, she only went there 1 year, and she rebelled so much. She said, "Put me back in a regular school." She refused to continue to go. But my vision was worse than hers at the time, and so she was able to get away with it. I was not, and so at the school, the best artist was a girl named Sharon Coleman, and she was the best artist. Where I was always the best artist at Naranka in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. Now all of a sudden, nobody knows who I am. Nobody cares. I'm Sharon. She's the one that does the best artwork. And so there was a guy in the VH department. There was about a dozen of us and we'd go to, it was a regular school, but they had a VH department, visually handicapped department. And one of the guys in the VH room was a guy named Ruben Corral, who, because he was from Mexico, was like twice my size, and he was 2 or 3 years older than I was, but we were in the same grade because he didn't have the opportunity to go to special school. And he would just scribble. He couldn't draw at all. So, and he got attention. Hey, look at that, isn't Ruben's stuff good? So he got attention for just doing crap. And so I started doing crap. I started, instead of showing my skills with the best I could, I started going the other direction and just scribbling. Although I did do one 3-dimensional project that Dr. Sam Cumby, who was the teacher, I did a sculpture. And I still have it in my office. You can still see it today, of a Buddha monk, and a bald head, and anyway, and it was all what would the word? It was all properly proportioned, and I got A in that for that project, and that's one of the few things that I still have from that. But that was a 3-dimensional thing.
Why did you keep that?
Because I got an A. Because it was actually.
Not saying you shouldn't. I'm just curious.
No, because it Good job, but that's also an astute question on your end, because there was other pieces I did, and in high school I did a collage, and I was just rushing through my art classes because I could do stuff, and if you got 7.5 points, you got an A. And I could have my art projects done within the first month of the semester. And I already got my A, so I could mess around after that. And I did this one project, and I don't even know to this day, I don't know what was so good about it. But we had my teacher was Mr. Swenis. His assistant, don't remember his name, but he went to San Diego State University. He took my art project and entered it into a statewide college competition, and it got first place. And he gave me the ribbon, the blue ribbon, for first place, and they just put it on display in the hallway at the high school. You know, on those little sliders with the locked doors, little locked windows, and then when I said, "Oh, can I get my art project back?" and they went there, and it was gone. No breaking, there was no glass broken. So we figured the student that claimed it to be his, that entered it, obviously went off with it. But other projects after that, I'd get my A, build my project, especially the 3-dimensional ones. I was good at, and then I would purposely sabotage them, because you fire them in a kiln, and if you have something that has air in it, it's completely sealed, it'll blow up. So I'd make my project, get my grade on it, and then when I'd have it fired, I'd purposely put in either a ball of clay with a hole in it, with sealed air in it, or build something in it, so when it was fired, it'd blow up.
Why did you do that?
Because I was angry that I lost. I was losing my vision and losing my ability to paint and draw, and so this was just one of the ways I was being ornery and just rebelling against my loss.
So I would love to ask you about, and this is from the very first moment that I saw the documentary, I've wanted to ask you about anger and rage, because one of my first thoughts upon watching the documentary, which was very emotional for me, to be honest, was that any woman who ever dates me should have to watch this movie, because it'll give her a better understanding of how consumed, for different reasons, but consumed I was by anger, or driven by it at the very least. How did you relate to anger, or what purpose did it serve for you then, and how do you relate to it now? And that's a big question, so you can break it up into any
segments. Yeah, at the time, I try to just describe how I dealt with some of my anger, and that was self-destructive. And I got into other self-destructive behavior, and it was the late 60s, beginning 70s, and so for about 3 years, drugs was a part of that as an act of rebellion. And purposely not trying to do my best. The only thing I did worked at was cards, and I would play cards with people, and I would take their money. and my drug dealing partner named Doug Ferguson, who died from hepatitis from dirty needles, and he would have me play cards against other drug dealers to cheat them or trick them out of their money, and that's how we supported ourselves, and we made our money to buy and sell.
Right.
And so that was kind of, actually that was kind of the only power that I had. The rest of the time I was laughed at, and there would be times where we would be doing something, drugs, and then when I'd come out of a stupor or blur, they'd be laughing at me, and they were at first they were the only people that accepted me, because I was. This is
the drug dealing crowd.
The drug crowd accepted. They don't. We don't care if you can't see. Come on over. And where the regular students were more discriminating towards some of us in the VH rooms, and so the drug people, they didn't care. But then when it got right down to it, I was more of a tool of amusement for them, and then I met a guy, and and now I'm going to get off on another little tangent here. It was a verse in the Bible said, God created us in His image. And that always fascinated me, in His image. And so I thought, okay, I'm in the image of God. What did God take dirt and made a person? God took dirt, made an eyeball. God took dirt and made a brain. God took dirt and made a bird. And I remember watching an episode of Kung Fu, and they said, who will teach me about the universe? The universe will teach you. And I thought, well, that's like saying the wall will teach me, but who built the wall? The wall, who built the Statue of Liberty? It wasn't the Statue of Liberty, didn't build the Statue of Liberty. So then I started thinking, me in the image of God, okay, God created a bird, man took dirt and created a jet. Mm-hmm. God took dirt, made eye, we took dirt and made a camera. They're staring at us all over the place. Mm-hmm. God took dirt and made a brain. We took dirt and made a computer. What's the chip in a fuse? Based sand, dirt. Just about everything in this room, in one fashion or another, came from dirt. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, okay, that means I can create. Mm-hmm. And so I went another direction. I got heavily into the martial arts, started in March 5th, 1971. And my karate instructor was a man named John Murphy.
May I pause you for 1 second? So what precipitated that 90-degree turn or that 180? Was there a conversation or a particular day, or what catalyzed?
What catalyzed that turn was I was with some friends, and they wanted to watch a movie called Fantastic Voyage, which was a movie about shrinking down a ship, a submarine, and then setting it into a guy's body to go into his heart to try to fix it, okay? And they said, hey, the Fantastic Voyage is on. Let's get some angel dust and watch the movie. And so I realized, I gotta stop this. And there was something out there saying, you need to stop it or you're gonna end up dead like Billy McComb. And I had a dozen friends who have now OD'd and were dead. And I thought, if I don't stop this, I'm gonna be next. And I realized I need some help. Anyway, so I went to these people at this park, Wales Park, and I asked them if they had any angel dust. They said, we have something better. I said, what's that? They said, a relation with the creator of everything you see. I said, you mind if I sit down and tell me what you know? And they're the ones that told me that we're not here by accident, we're here by design, and that there is a creator. And so it was at that moment that I decided I was going to change my direction. Turn
around. And then you mentioned the martial arts and John Murphy. Every moment of my life is like a video I can watch and pin in on any exact image or moment. And that was February 13th, 71. 3 weeks later, March 5th, my brother, who was 7 years younger than me, he was 9, and he was taking karate. And I wanted to take karate because I was tired. I would get beat up. I'll get off on a little tangent. I entered another art competition when I was 11, and I had to have my nose like 2 inches from the canvas as I painted these 3 vases with proper shadow lights coming in. It got first place. These 2 boys didn't like that. This blind kid got first place, and they called me Mr. Magoo. There was a cartoon out that time starring Jim Backus called Mr. Magoo. It was this goofy, sight-impaired person that just went through life jollily, just missing trains and planes, trains, and automobiles, and that was me. And so they would say, they'd flip the bird in front of my face and say, hey, Magoo, how many fingers am I holding up? And while I was distracted, his friend picked the wallet out of my back pocket and then dangled it in front of my face and said, hey, Magoo, got any money? And when I grabbed for my wallet, he'd then throw it over my head to his friend behind me in a cool game of keep away. And they kept, every time I turned around and grabbed it, they'd just keep going back and forth over my head. And then finally, one of them started literally slapping me across the cheeks with my own wallet saying, got any money, blind boy? And the other kid jumped on my back, drove me to the ground, kicked me in the ribs,
And they ran off laughing, saying, "Thanks for the hot dog, Magoo," because I had $3 in there. For me, $3 was that was all my entire life savings, card play, and everything all rolled up into $3. And so I was so upset about that. And so that jumps forward to the martial arts. Is that where we wanted to head? And anyway, so my brother was taking karate, and so I wanted to go down, and they gave him warning. Well, you know, this guy can't see, and Murphy, he didn't care if you're blind, deaf, or dumb. He beat everyone equally. He was my sensei, Sensei John Murphy. He was a year ahead of Chuck Norris. He was a class of '57. Norris was started in '58, and Murphy opened up his school in Tijuana in 1960, and he was the first white guy, what's called white guy, Caucasian. He was Irish, to get a black belt in Japan. In this particular system, Wadokai, which is a kind of a cross between Shotokan and Taekwondo, or it combines hands and feet. Where Shotokan, strict Shotokan, which is the #1 style, was really mainly hands. Anyway, he said, "We'll take him. And at first he told him, "Don't hurt him." And the girls, I'd get beat up by the girls. I'd get beat up by the old ladies that we would, Noelle, who would be our driver, old enough to be my mother, and it was all I could do to keep from ending up on the floor. And so I realized, okay, I gotta start getting better at this. And at that time I weighed 110 pounds, and I'd had my full height of 5'9". And Murphy said, "Okay, I want you to start you need to start lifting weights, because you got to put some meat on those bones." So I started pushing weights, and I went to Gene Fisher's gym. And Fisher, he held the world's record for the curl at that time, 1963, 221 pounds.
So much
221
weight for a
pounds
curl.
recorded and 226 unrecorded. And of course, he was in the 200-pound category. Yeah. And so at that time, I weighed 130 pounds. I got up to 130 pounds. And at 130 pounds, I could pull down 220. And he would have to pull me down, lock me in, do my reps, lift me back up. I was about 250 on the bench at that time at 130 pounds. And then Murphy would push me to the point where I could do 500 push-ups in 12 minutes, 9 seconds, which is my record, but usually it's 500 push-ups, maybe 15 minutes, which was actually world-class time, the record at the time.
I don't think I could do 500 push-ups in 15 days.
Yeah, I know that is a bluff on your end. Everybody out there that just listened to Tim say that, Tim is an athlete. Tim is probably just as crazy as I am. He's being modest right now. I'm just telling you, because he doesn't want to speak for himself. Listen to what I'm saying, everybody. Tim, I felt Tim out when we first got together. And I mean that in a nice way. I checked those his forearms. Popeye, I know, jealous. Popeye, you're jealous. Olive oil, he's over here.
So 500 push-ups, thank you for saying that.
But average would be 15.
Earning the 20 that I slipped you earlier before we recorded.
The world record at the time was 1900 an hour. So I was world-class time, 15 in 1/4 of the time, 1/4 and 1/4 of the time. So it was, and then that's when I'd travel around with that briefcase with 120 pounds in dumbbells that would be broken apart, put together on the road, do my exercises, and so on. Anyway, so then Murphy says, you need more weight. And so he said, "Why don't you take vitamins every day?" So I started taking vitamins. And he said, "Protein powders." So for the past 50 years, almost 49 years, every morning I'd throw everything under the sun. I even throw my vitamin tablets in the blend and blend them up with protein powder. And then I came up with the best drink for, if you have two choices: burn up or work out like a madman. And I call it liquid hell.
All right.
And what it is, you take water as your base,
yeah,
and then I'd put in Schiff's brewer's yeast, which really is tastes bad.
Yeah.
I put in half a banana for potassium and 3 to 4 to 6 jalapeno peppers. Blend it up, and you had two choices. You either worked out or you sweats just started pouring out your head. And my workout partner, Jim Blowers, who you probably saw in Delt, he was the one that was talking about riding on the back of my motorcycle, telling me where to go. And he said, when he first started college, I said, okay, you have to have some liquid hell. And the first time he did it, he threw up in the sink. And I said, you're not wasting that liquid hell. You drank the rest of that. And so he got it down, and he couldn't go through a final without having his liquid hell because it stimulated his brain and his body. Anyway, so, but it's not for sissies, I'll just say that. Anyway, so that's what I would drink to just boost the energy level. And anyway, so I finally put on some weight, and then I remember 1980 is when I broke 160, got up to 160 pounds. And then I kept pressing, and I got up to, I worked out with Doug McNulty, who was Mr. Universe, at his place. And I got up to 340 on the bench. That's where I topped out at. And I weighed in at 168. And today, when I got my first black belt, my first degree black belt, and Murphy wanted the hardest test, and it was considered the hardest test at the time. You had to fight a 10-round bout with a fresh fighter each round, 10 3-minute rounds. And he didn't care he didn't want to deal with lawsuits, so most of the testing and training took place across the border of San Diego and Tijuana. And so that's where his school, he had school in the States and another main branch.
Quick question for you. Is it true that you were offered an honorary black belt?
Yes. Because
and you did not accept?
No, to get my first belt, I had to fight 1 round, 3 minutes, and plus all the katas. And the thing about the katas, because of my eidetic memory, I could memorize them in 1 day.
Right.
Yeah, and in fact, when I got my 4th degree black belt, I had a 6th degree black belt kata that I learned in 1 day. The guy who went through it, and then the next thing he sees it on film, he goes, I can't believe you did it. I just showed that to you, blah, 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 just days before,
And for those people who don't know, kata is a predetermined sequence of moves that you perform alone.
Exactly, doing punches, kicks, blocks, counters, and it's like a martial arts dance.
Right, so a 6th degree black belt kata would be like someone being shown a sort of extremely complex halftime performance at the Super Bowl dance routine, and then being able to replicate it shortly thereafter.
Perfectly explained, exactly, Tim. And so I get the katas and all that stuff down overnight, right off the bat. But it was the fighting, because to let you understand how I was seeing at the time, because I had some vision. At that time, my teens and 20s, my vision was measured at 20/400, 20/450, with no center vision, because my macula, which is the center of the eye, was gone. Yeah. Okay, so there's no macula, that's your forward vision. So if you just picture yourself, there's a hat in front of your face. Wherever I turn my head, there's a hat blocking that part of the vision, okay? With me?
Yeah.
Out of the corner of my eye was 24/450. So 2200 is legally blind. 2050 is, you have to have at least 2050 to drive. So out of the corner of my eye, that's where I would see the images or shadows of my opponent. And so I'd always be looking at you like cockeyed.
I was wondering about that, because I noticed that in the footage from the documentary.
Yes.
Yeah, got it. So you're looking at your peripheral vision.
Yes, because I had no forward vision at all.
Right.
And that's how I know when I'm looking at people at that time. Now I have no vision at all.
Right.
But at that time, if I couldn't see anything, I knew I was looking right at you, which was anyway. So because my first belt yellow was 1 fight, green belt I had 5 2-minute rounds, 5 bouts, 5 rounds, with a fresh fighter, 2-minute rounds, and on a scale of 1 to 10. I trained, I practiced, and I thought, okay, I figured it was going to be maybe a 4, 5, or 6. It turned out to be a 20. It was beyond my worst nightmare. And it was August 2nd, 1972, and it was over 100 degrees outside, and our dojo was in Tijuana, as I said, and it was a solid cement block building. Yeah. No windows, no air conditioner, not even a fan. Wood floor, scratched up wood floor, and whenever they would have tests, it was like blood sports, like cockfights. Yeah. And so all the sadistic people would come out to watch whenever they hear that the gringos are going to be coming up and there's going to be some fights. And so John Douglas was testing for his black belt that day, and I was testing for my green belt. I was the pre-show before the big show.
Right.
And,
the warm-up act.
Well, I was the warm-up act, and so I get out there thinking, and it was because we're all crammed into these little things. The humidity factor was in the 90s.
Yeah.
So before I even started, I'm pouring. I was gasping for breath as soon as I did my first set of katas. Then I did my defense moves. I was already gasping. And then I started my first round. And right before we started, the rule was we would respect each other's head. If you don't hit me in the face, I won't hit you in the face. Body's open target, no limit. Mm-hmm. Okay, groin shots, everything the way we would respect each other's knees. No knee shots, everything else was open. If you hit me in the face, then the face becomes an open target. Mm-hmm. And so Murphy said, now if these guys start hitting you in the face, don't think about it, just keep fighting. And at that time I thought, what? I thought we were gonna mark our shots to the face. And within the first few seconds of the first round, bam, 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 3 shots, bam, 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 right in my face. And I'm going, oh my God. I realized I was fighting for my life because they didn't like us gringos down there. And everything was just set in, discriminated against the Black Clan, which were the black fighters, Black Federation, and the Mexican fighters, and the gringos.
Right.
And so the first round, I'm just gasping for air. Second round, this guy watched the Bruce Lee movie of Enter the Dragon, or no, it was before that, Fist of Fury, where he does a step-up heel hook, spins around with the other heel hook, and I catch the one, like, wow, I blocked that, boom, only get nailed with the other one coming around the other way. And third round, this guy would like knees, so I kept getting knees in the groin. Fourth round, the guy was even stance, he switched stances on me, grabbed my front hand, went right by me, and bam, right in my left eye, caught an Orozuki, or a right-hand punch. And pretty much knocked me out. And now I've seen enough, I'm just seeing stars. And Murphy says, wipe off the blood, don't think about it, keep fighting. And I'm just holding myself up against the bathroom, and I couldn't even hold my hands up by this point. And so then the fifth round was probably my best round because I was really I was virtually unconscious. And then they yelled, Rosemary, his wife, yells, tiempo, which means time in Spanish. Yeah. And the second she wrote tempo is when I hit the ground. So I got it by 1 second, and then I was so exhausted and have an asthma attack. I had to stand up because I had to bow out. Yeah. And as soon as I bowed out, I hit the ground again. Now everybody wants to congratulate me. I had to stand up again. And we weren't allowed to have water. And so I crawled to the bathroom. And John Douglas will tell this story, but Murphy's probably going to be mad at me for telling it. And when he came to, he says, that's not the sink you're drinking out of, Rick. That's the toilet. And I was drinking out of a TJ toilet, Tijuana toilet. And I go, I don't care. I was so dazed, and I got gonorrhea.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But anyway, so that was green belt. So then the brown belt was 10 2-minute rounds. Yeah. And I managed, and then of course on that one, I trained like a mad dog because I wasn't going to have that last experience. So I made that, and then from brown to black was such a jump. It took me another 10 years before I was able to take on the 10 fighters. And just to give you a quick rundown of what my workout looked like to prepare for it, I'd warm up with a 4-hour weight workout.
Okay? 4 hour?
4 hour. And I would start at minimum weight all the way up to maximum weight, and I would get to the maximum. I would lift as many times as I could with a few seconds, many times I could. And then I'd slowly off just 5 pounds at a time, from 300 pounds, 395, 295, 290, all the way down to where I had just the bar, which was a 45-pound bar, and then I did that with every muscle group. And then I would do 500 kicks on the heavy bag, 10 roundhouse kicks with this leg, 10 with this one, 10, do 100 of that. Then I do 10 side kick with this leg, 10 side kick with this leg, 10 side, another 100, 10 back turn kicks, 10 side, whatever, step across side kick, but just did 5 different kicks, 500 times. Then my trainer, he would have what looked like a motorcycle seat. It was a bag, and he would hold it, and and with his hand, and then I would have to do 100 kicks in 3 minutes. And so simulating the 3 rounds. So I would just bam, 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 punch, kick, mainly kicking, because that exhausts your oxygen supply faster than punching. That's why in kickboxing matches, they're required to throw a minimum of I think 6 kicks or 8 kicks. And that's because after you start getting tired, you just want to punch. It takes a fraction of the oxygen it does to lift these big muscles up in the air. And so I do that, and I take a 10-second break, do another 100, another 20-second break, 100, I do 1,000, I do it 10 times, it would be another 1,000 kicks. From there, I would do a 5-mile run, and I lived in San Diego, and they had big hills there. And one of the hills was 1.5 miles down, 1.5 miles back up, and when I got to the top, I would sprint the distance of a house, and then run the distance, sprint, run, sprint. And then I would do 10 quarter-mile wind sprints, and then I'd throw up. And then I'd go do my shows, then I'd go perform. I'd perform at night. And then every other day, I would go rounds. Murphy Douglas would have me go, 5 rounds, 5 rounds, building up to it, and sometimes 2-on-1, because you don't have time to rest at that. But I sustained that particular discipline for 8 months. And Douglas said I overtrained. I went too long. But my problem was asthma. Because being asthmatic, sometimes fear can trigger an asthma attack, and that's what happened on that green belt that I described. And you can't fight if you can't breathe. And so I had to train my mind to not become afraid. Fear can paralyze. We can be so worried about doing the wrong thing that we do nothing. There's actually an English proverb that says, "A man that's afraid to make a mistake is unlikely to make anything." In other words, totally worthless. Fire the bum. Fear of failure, when left unchecked, can actually lead to the failure we fear.
Yeah.
And so I just started, like I said, putting myself in positions and conditions to help my mind overcome those effects. And I did things, we just talked about the physical. I did mental things like eating live cockroaches, live grasshoppers, the most absurd things, rotten fish guts that sat in the sun for a week. You saw where I chomped down on the eyeball of the mahi-mahi. And the thing is, if you can't take it, the person would throw up.
Yeah.
And the people that were watching almost throw up. One of them, when I did the guts, they did throw up.
Don't try this at home, kids.
Don't try this at home.
This is a closed track with a trained professional.
Yeah, it was just to train my mind to be able to take whatever is being dished out. Yeah. And if I can control my mind and body, then I can make it. And that triggers another thought real quick. I'm going to go back to the Bonnet syndrome, Charles Bonnet, and how that can create strength. One of the ways I use it the most, and we haven't even mentioned, is in training. As what I can do tremendous numbers of reps. When I took my 4th degree black belt test, I was in my I was 47 or 48. I lifted 222,888 pounds using 3,190 reps. And the 24-year-old, 220-pound black belt who trained alongside me could not do 50% of the number of reps or weight. And that's because I don't get lactic acid buildup, because I would combine the mind with the body. Now you'll see people do this. They'll say, "Come on, Bonnet!" They're trying to convince their body to do it. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When you combine mind and body together, they're not doing that. And what I would do is when I'd get to the point of exertion, and I would then transfer it, I'd use my CBS, on a bench press. I would see a cable on the bench press. I'd see a cable going up, across 2 pulleys. On the other end is this gorilla-shaped thing, or an Arnold Schwarzenegger and gorilla together, pulling on that thing, pulling that weight up. And I would focus on that image, pulling the weight up. And during that moment, I would no longer feel the stress as my muscles continue to press. And I have exercises for I have a mental visual exercise I'll use for each exercise, like the quadricep extension. You're in exertion when you're straightening your legs, right? Right. And so what I would see in front of me is a big giant rubber band. When the band is stretched down, when the weights are down, and then the rubber band would go up and it would just go wide, and that's when it's pulling the weight up. So I'd watch it and I would see it pulling the weight up. So when I'm doing the exertion, is when I'd feel it the least. Or another image, like when I'm doing a hammer, like I'm on my back doing a tricep, I would see a hammer falling, okay? And when the hammer's falling is the least amount of effort, right? Because the way the hammer's going down. But when I'm like this, so I'd see the hammer falling, but that's when the tricep is being engaged. Yeah. And I taught my wife, I taught my wife this, and within a month's time, what she would do, I'd say, well, look at yourself in the mirror, your reflection. And when you get to the exertion, like a bench, a military press, at the point of exertion, so you want to do, we always do sets of 52 reps. And when you get to 48, then transfer that, see that image of that reflection, pulling those weights up. And she got to the point where she increased her muscular endurance 30% in a month time, and she was already in top shape. And right now, I could give you an example of that if you wanted to stand up. Mm-hmm. But and of course now I'm almost 66. So I don't know if I used to have a demonstration that I would do where I would bend the arm of the person. And there's only one person's arm I was not able to bend, and doing this demonstration for 40 years, and no one has ever bent my arm. But if you want to stand up, I can. I don't know if this is.
Sure, let's try it.
So, but I'm not going to try to bend your arm because of surgery. You get on this side of me.
All right.
And see, look at those muscles. Now, usually I put myself up against the back, so I'm pinned in. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to have you put your arm right here. Okay. Your other arm here. Yeah. Okay. Not on the wrist. I want to put wrist. And your job, this way, all you're going to do is just bend this little elbow here. All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. And look, I'm not using. Go. Come on.
It's not going to happen.
I'm not using any strength at all. Look at my hand. Yeah. Totally relaxed. Yeah. Now I'll tell you how I did it.
Okay.
Once again, it's creating mind and body together. What I did is I envisioned my arm as a fire hose, shooting out that fire hose 1,000 gallons of water a minute. Yeah. You can't bend a fire hose. I'm sorry, right? If you think about a fire hose when the water's shooting, you're not gonna bend a fire hose. So I get that image in my mind. I'm just shooting that fire hose, and I've never had anyone ever bend my arm, and yet. Without that, until I showed them, they learn how to do that. Then I can't bend their arm. But anyway, that's just kind of a little side note. But how I've used my CBS to create a lot of strength, and I also used it in my training with the cards when I would train, when I analyze moves and break them down, and what I would do. I'm just kind of transitioning into something else here randomly. But what I would do. And why I was able to put in so many hours is I would analyze the move. So okay, I want a second deal a certain way. So I'd analyze the move. Okay, I want no leaking, and so I'd analyze what I want to do, and I'd practice it in slow motion till every exacted element of the muscle memory was firmly embedded in my brain. Okay, then I would turn it into a subconscious habit. We all have habits where we're tapping a pen, right? Yeah. Tapping our feet. That's idle energy wasted. It's like an engine of a car running, going nowhere, just idling. That's still energy expelled, right? So what I did is I learned to take all that energy and funnel it into just my hands and what's in my hands. And so that's why I would take it and I turned it into a subconscious habit. And that move, I would then sit there and practice it hundreds of times. I do it thousands of times, tens of thousands of times, hundreds of thousands of times. Then maybe 2 or 3 years later, I'll look down and go, by golly, I got it. And then some of the things Vernon would say, that's not possible to do. And so I would figure it out, analyze it, show it to him, and then he'd go, I don't understand how you can do that.
Well, what I loved discovering in the process of prepping for this conversation, and I want to put a button in the black belt test in a second, but that Vernon would describe to you the ideal of how something would be performed, even though in reality he hadn't seen it executed that perfectly. And you, with your powers of visualization and the way that you would digest his teaching, would then go and develop the ability to do what he thought could not be done. At least that's my understanding.
That's exactly right. And he did that I had the privilege of being with Professor Vernon for 17 years. In those first 5 to 6, 10 years, like you said, he would describe to me, he said, Richard, this is the way it has to be done. Your hands have to be natural. You don't want this deep grip when you're going to deal a second or a bottom. Your fingers need to be on the sides because it's more natural. That's more the way you're going to see your general person in the public hold a deck of cards. And so you don't want to create any unnatural suspicion by your actions. And so he would tell me, okay, you have to be able to do it with those fingers on the side. And so, okay, fingers on the side. And you don't want any of this action here. So I'd practice with my hand on the table without moving it. And so I would take the pieces, what he said, and I would practice it. And he would actually tell me, he'd say, feel my hands. Feel the position my hands are in. I would feel his hands. Okay, got it. Okay, okay, I got it. So I'd see the picture in my mind of what his hands were showing me. But he never did it because it's an action. I really couldn't see him do the action because my hands would get in the way of him executing the action. Right. But I knew the action of what he was showing. So in my mind, I would see his hands, visualize what he said, this is the way it should be done. And then I would come up with it and create it. And then the next time he would see me, he'd go, hey, come on, watch this, look at this, watch this action, perfect action. You know, he'd get all excited. He'd have all the other card guys come over and watch a perfect rhythm. Anyway, Larry was one of my critics at the time, but became a good friend. Same with Tony Giorgio. Yeah. But so that's what he would do, is he'd trick me. And it was only till years later that he told me he made them up. He just wanted to see what this obsessed kid would come up with. And that's why my work is kind of, as most 99.9% of the gamblers and cardmen out there will tell you, it's unique and separate from the way any other person handles the cards. And
I want to tie up one loose end with the black belt test, just to flash forward, because we covered a lot of it, but 10 fresh fighters, 10 rounds, you end up with a broken arm at some point.
7th round.
In the 7th round, so you're fighting with a broken arm. There's footage of this, of course, in the documentary, which I encourage everybody to see. And you get your black belt. There was coverage of this experience. Of course, there were some cameras, but also there was a piece in, was it the LA Times?
LA Times.
Now, why did you, my understanding is you did not like the piece, or you did not like the headline. Why is that?
Well, because they used the word blind man earns black belt. And at that time, I was very stubborn. And I was just stubborn and probably self-absorbed. And I wanted my work to stand on its own. And I wanted to earn it the way Terry Crook, John Douglas, and his top other black belt fighters did. That's why when they offered me an honorary black belt, he said, you put in your time, you put in your lumps. I said, no, I want to do it the way you did. And then that's when I started the training, like I described earlier. But it took me 13 years and 3 months and 5 days from when I started to when I finally got it, from beginning to soup and nuts. And but anyway, the fact that they had to put the word blind man earns black belt, to me, it was like, I don't like the theme, handicap makes good. I want the theme, okay, I just made good because I did it. And to be perfectly honest with you, I kept telling people, I wanted to do it the way they did it. And people would say, but you didn't. And I go, yes, I did. And it was literally, Tim, within the last 6 months that someone said something that I understood what they said. When they said, I didn't do it the way they did it, I did it the way they couldn't have done it. Yeah. They weren't sight impaired when they did it. I never understood what they were saying because I was so pig-headed about I wanted to do it the way they did it, but then when you flip it, I finally got the message. I did it in a way that it was very unlikely that they or anyone else would have had a hard time doing if they could have done it at all.
Oh, probably next to impossible, if not impossible.
Yeah,
and I want to dig into the visualization, because it seems to be such a superpower. And I might ask you what you consider to be your superpowers, but this visualization and the CBS and eidetic memory that you mentioned really seem to coalesce to give you some incredible abilities, whether that's the feats of strength or work with the cards. You mentioned earlier that the way you see things when you're scanning or planning the construction, the design and construction of a 3-story patio or deck, for instance, is different from dreaming. And so that begets the question, what is dreaming like for you?
Very good question. Because like you were saying, I see my subconscious in external space. So, and it's just a constant stagnant situation of all these colors, patterns, just there until I want to bring them into play. And it doesn't matter if it's day, night, if my eyes are open or closed, I see the exact same thing with my eyes covered up in a vault. I'll see these vivid, bright colors when there's absolutely no way of light getting in. Now, when I dream, in my dreams, I'm never sight impaired. And I dream in full color with audio and visual, and I see perfectly. And everybody I see in those dreams is perfectly clear. Which, someone brought that to my attention in some questions that I was asking. And I thought, well, I guess that's kind of unusual. But yeah, I'm never, like I said, part of the dream is never that I'm sight impaired, nor do I see any of the CBS symptoms in any of my dreams. Now, if I wake up in the middle of the night, say, and I had to take some Tylenol or something from some surgery. I've had 24 surgeries from all my high-impact living. And medication, when I wake up, will turn everything into a metallic colors, and usually a lot of times it's purple.
This is if you wake up in the middle of the night.
Middle of the night, after taking some kind of medication from some kind of injury that I'm on. Medications turn it metallic, and it turns it usually a purple, which is not a pretty purple to me. I don't like it.
You mentioned maroon was one of your favorite colors.
And then royal blue on the blue spectrum.
What other favorite colors do you have? And did you have them before losing your sight, or did you develop them afterwards?
I probably wasn't aware of favorite colors before.
Right.
So much as I am now, because I see them all the time, and the different shades depending on the time of year, depending on the particular day. Sometimes it's just really vivid blues, and it's just beautiful. Sometimes when I'm out walking with my beautiful wife Kim, and my CBS will create a skyline. Okay, in other words, the things will be darker here, and that's the skyline, and then it'd be lighter shades to give the image of earth, sky. Okay, and then I go in, and I have to ask my wife, is it still light out? Because it will stay there, and sometimes it's late into the night, and I can't get I can't get rid of it. Sometimes it can bother me because I want that to go down because it's now nighttime. So there are some times that it will be a bit on the distracting side.
What I have as a note to ask, I didn't want to get any of the details beforehand, but a note to ask you about your experience of wind.
That's a fun. I can see the wind blow. Whenever I'm walking down the street with Kim or whatever, of course I automatically see the images of trees, but they're more like clouds, and there'll be green shapes and colors to replicate, give the image of trees. Okay, but whenever the wind blows, everything, all my visualization things that I see will go with that wind. They will gust. If it gusts, they'll move a little bit more. If I do this, everything just went. Whoop,
if you tap
if I tap my side of the head, everything just jerked over and went back straight. Just weird little things. Like when I go in, I'm in a pool. My eyes are closed the whole time because I don't need my eyes open when I'm swimming. I don't have to worry about the chlorine and stuff.
Right.
And so when I'm above the pool, there's a certain hue in other words, a level of brightness of the color. When I go under the water, I actually see myself going underwater, and the hue changes. It deepens, like putting on sunglasses.
Right.
Sunglasses off, sunglasses on. And even as I made that image, my eyes are closed, all of a sudden things went darker and lighter. I can pretend that I'm opening and when I open and close my eyes, the hue is like pulling down a shade that has a sunblock, not a sunblock, but
like
the sunglasses would be the best way to describe it. So the hue changes, and then now if I just pretend that my eyes are closed the whole time, I'm pretending I'm opening and closing my eyes, it'll do the same thing.
And
I don't know what relevance that had to anything, but it's just these little games.
This is just a conversation between friends. Nobody listening or watching. And so I'm just following my own interest. And I want to talk about the enjoyment of not relaxing. That's more said with a smile, but when we took a little break to have some water, you said, to me, relaxing is not relaxing. And you talked about how being told to relax or asked to relax is like being punished and put in the corner for misbehaving at school. For you, in that case, given your obsessive compulsive dedication to training, to card mechanics, to movement, how do you replenish? What activities do you find recharge your batteries? And maybe you could just elaborate on, to me, relaxing is not relaxing.
Okay, yeah. And I'm going to bring up a friend of mine who's like a brother. His name is Luke Coram. Mm-hmm. He was the director of the film Dealt that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And I'll just say something quick about the film. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't for Luke, in particular, probably I'd say 80% Luke, and then Bradley and Russell, the producer and the writer. But Luke was the one that just had the creativity. If they would have listened to me, and they listened zero to me, they did. I would have screwed up the film. Mm-hmm. The brilliance of that film is I lay it at the feet of the director Luke. And he would tell me, and he actually lived with me. He had his own place in my house at certain times, Luke's room. And I never have, many times I didn't know the cameras were on or off. And he would say, well, let's chill, which I found out was a word for relaxing. And chill, I don't want to chill.
What is this
It's not
chill?
fun. And I said, relaxing? For me, relaxing is not fun. Relaxing is like when I was a kid and I was being punished. And my parents, as a punishment, I'd have to stand in the corner for an hour and just stare at the corner. To me, chilling is not fun. Relaxing is not fun. To me, relaxing is adventure. And I would tell people, and I would tell Luke, I'd say, don't worry about the end result. When the film is done, it's going to be a piece, it'll be what it is, and it will be finished. Enjoy the journey. Okay? And look at every obstacle and every challenge and every hurt and pain that you come across as part of the adventure of the journey. When you read a book, you don't want a book that, he went and he entered this rest and he won, and then he entered that one, no trouble, he won, and he climbed this mountain and he won. That's boring. Yeah. You have to have antagonists, protagonists, and you have to have challenges, you have to have things that you have to overcome. So I would tell people, whatever the situation is, look at it as part of the adventure. My livelihood almost came to an end 5 years ago. Well, multiple times. Like I said, I've had 24 surgeries. I had to recount them just last week. Am I at 23, 22, 23, or 24? I realized I have 2 steel knees from all the years of kicking. I took a shot here, roundhouse kick here. At first I did surgery and finally had to be replaced. And just, millions of kicks, just finally did them in. I've had 5 hernia surgeries. I did a backflip off my front porch, landed on my 5th disc on my back, on the brick, drove it out my belly button. I've had 3 back surgeries, and then fortunately, and that's so complicated. Doctors, they have a hard time with backs. And then they have this thing called a neural stimulator Medtronic makes, and I have that, and it short circuits the pain from the back to your brain. Amazing. Ever since that, like my wife said, gave our life back.
We have this table available. We have some cards. Would you like to show anything or do anything?
Oh yeah, you have a deck of cards there for yourself, right?
I do.
Shuffle them up.
All right, we'll see this how amateur the shuffle can be here.
Yeah, you just
I can barely shuffle with 2 hands.
Well, then use one.
Yeah.
I just showed you how.
All right.
Okay.
All right, we're good to go.
Switch decks with me.
All right.
Okay.
Here you go.
Now, in poker, you've heard of like wild cards, like deuces are wild. Baseball have multiple wild cards.
Yes.
Other games, they'll just cut a card, that would be the wild card. Just cut off half the deck.
I'm going to move. There's 1 card left over here.
Yeah,
I can
please
put it on my deck?
Yes.
Yeah, all right, there we go.
Okay, just cut the deck in half here.
All right.
Tell them when you got it.
Done.
Okay, and just to make it more random, just say any random number, 3, 4, 5, 7, anything you want.
6.
6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What's that card?
Queen of diamonds.
So the queens will be the wild card, okay? Now you just shuffle these cards, right?
I did.
Now have you ever played poker for money? And let me ask this, have you ever played in a casino? Or have you ever wondered, when I play in a casino, am I getting conned?
I have lost in a casino.
Okay, so that thought has crossed your mind, am I getting conned?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to show you. You just handed me a randomized deck, and I'm going to do this in an interesting way. In the high-stake games, they'll cut between every shuffle because that buries the top and bottom halves of the deck. I'll give the deck a little riffle, and people like to cascade the cards into them. Give a cut. So I'm telling you what I'm doing as I do it, and I shuffle. Mm-hmm. Did everything look legit?
Looked legit.
And not a move you saw was. So you're already in trouble. Now I'll show you. I'll show you.
Not a move I saw.
Was honest.
Not a 1. Okay.
Not a 1. Now I'll show you how fast I can uncut that deck. What's that card?
That is the 2 of clubs.
The 2 of clubs. So they'll pass the deck to the right to be cut, and now the deck is no longer cut. So 2 still on top. Watch again. Now watch again. I'm showing you how fast I can uncut the deck. The deck is no longer cut.
Yeah.
And that was about a half a second.
Yeah.
Now you've heard of Texas Hold'em.
I have, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll deal a hand of Hold'em. And in Hold'em, they have what's called a cut card or a burnt card. They put the deck on a face-up card. Now, after the fact, you're going to tell me, keep everything off the table here, give me a full table here.
All right.
After the fact, you're going to tell me how many people step up to my Hold'em table. Let's pick a number 5 or 6 because we don't have a lot of room.
5.
5 players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, burn, and we have what's called the flop. And what are those 3 cards?
You got the King of Hearts, the 2 of Hearts, and the Queen of Clubs.
And the deuces are not wild, but the queens was your card. Mm-hmm. And so that means there's a pair of kings on the table. There's a burn and a turn. What's that card?
That's King of
Burn and turn. So right now we have 3 kings because the queen is a wild card. What's that card?
That's a Queen.
Right now we have 4 kings. Let's get rid of our burn card. And you're my partner sitting over here in hand number 5. Let's see what you have in the pocket. What's that?
That's a Queen.
What's that?
That's a Queen.
So in the poker, you would have 5 of a kind, 5 kings, or you'd have a royal flush, depending on how you wanted to play the hand. In other words, you killed them, slaughtered them, beat them, whipped them big time. Okay. Now shuffle that deck.
Okay.
I'll show you how far I can push the envelope.
All right. So I'll shuffle this one. And I think we got 2 cards that got turned up on that one.
Okay. That's your job. Make sure that one's all legitimate.
Yep.
Okay, and then I'll switch with you.
All right, there we go.
Okay.
All right.
And you can make sure everything's legitimate on that one.
Yep.
All right, we'll give the deck a cut, and we'll play my favorite game, 7 Card Stud. And this will take a couple minutes to unfold, but it's interesting. Now, we have a deck of cards shuffled by Tim. Mm-hmm. Now, we'll stay with the same number of players. Well, you choose 4 players or 5. You choose.
4.
Where do you want to sit? Number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4?
I'll be number 1.
Number 1, right out of the chute. I'm getting ready. I'm dealing a card in slow motion to hand number 1. Mm-hmm. Before I continue, take this deck, mix them up. Don't give me the whole deck back. Just pull out any random part of that deck and put them in my hands. Just do something quick and just put a stack.
Just a couple of cards.
No, well, more than a couple, but enough to get around. Just a stack. So I'm going to work with whatever you give me, okay? Tim just handed me back a random stack of cards. We're dealing a card to play on hand number 2, player number 3, and player number 4. You're number 1, slow motion, watch carefully. There's your card. And we go player 2, 3, 4. Now we have what are called the door cards, which means the face-up cards. What's that card?
Jack of Spades.
Jack, 1, player 2, player 3, player 4. You're number 1. What's that card?
Ace of Clubs.
2, number 3, number 4. You're number 1. What's that card?
Ace of diamonds.
Okay, mix them up some more.
Mix up the entire deck?
Whatever, you're the boss.
Okay.
And just have me any part of that deck you want. So you're doing everything you can to screw things up. Okay, and you just, okay, that's like 5 cards less than the last time you handed me. Okay, we have player 2, player 3, player 4. And so far we have 3 cards face up, yes?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And what's that card?
It's Queen of diamonds.
Wild card. What? Do it again. Mix them up. Have me any part of the deck you want. So you're shuffling, cutting.
Mm-hmm.
You chose how many players. You chose where you want to sit. You hand me any random part of the deck. Oh my gosh, you're getting stingy. Down to 6 cards. Player 2, player 3, player 4, and we have what's called down and dirty. I'm now dealing a card off the top to Tim's first position. 2, 3, 4. Put that with the rest of the stack.
Okay.
Now let's see what you have in your hand. We're playing 7 card stud, high Chicago. That means high spade in the hole splits the money.
All right.
So let's see what you have. What's that card?
Queen of diamonds.
That's a queen, a wild card. So we'll put it over here. What's that?
Ace of diamonds.
That would be a pair of aces because the queen's wild. What's that?
Ace of clubs.
That equals 3 aces. What's that?
This is Jack of spades.
Jack. What's that?
That's a 10 of spades.
10, Jack, ace. What's that?
That is the Queen of spades.
Another wild card. So right now you have 2 aces and 2 queens, right?
That's right.
So you right now that would equal 4 aces. And the best possible hand in wild card is 5 aces. We're playing high spade and the whole splits the pot. What's that?
That's ace.
Ace of
spades.
5 aces. The best possible hand you can get in poker is 5 aces. You shuffled, you cut, you chose how many players you wanted, you chose where you wanted to sit, and you kept mixing them up, and you didn't even give me a full deck. So you could honestly say, that Turner doesn't play with a full deck.
That Turner does not play with a full deck. That's
and yet
amazing.
I dealt you the perfect hand in poker.
That's incredible.
That's regrettable?
It's incredible?
Oh, that's better. That's
yeah,
better.
yeah, incredible.
Oh, man. That's regrettable.
Amazing.
All right. But that shows you how far I can
Yeah.
push. And that particular thing to be, and I know this, and I don't mean to sound boastful, because it's hard to talk about, when you're asking questions about yourself, it's hard to talk about yourself and not sound bad. But Vernon, when he first saw me do that, I said, Professor, what do you think about combining this and this and this? And he goes, Ricky, you can't do it. It's not possible. It can't be done. Yeah. And I said, oh. He said, you can't do it because 3 reasons. 1, your brain can't respond that fast. Your hands cannot be that sensitive, and you would break rhythm. Put those all cards back together from this deck. Okay, he said that's not possible. And I were at the Magic Castle, and for 10 minutes I sat there. He was sitting at the bar, and I was standing next to him, and I was depressed. For 10 minutes I sat there going, this is the ultimate. This is the perfect way. And I thought, and he said it can't be done. Then all of a sudden I remembered, but I can do it. I said, Professor, come watch my show. And he came out of the show after, he goes, Richard, what the hell were you doing in there? I don't understand what the hell you were doing. I said, remember when you said you can't combine this and this? That's what I'm doing. I don't understand how the hell you can do that. And he goes, Max, come here, watch this. And everybody, for the next 18 months, every time I was there, he'd have me shuffle the cards. How many players you want? Where do you want to sit? Watch this. And over and over. And 2 years later, he goes, still don't understand how the hell you can do that. And he knows exactly what I'm doing and exactly how I'm doing it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I have these, all the cards are facing the same way. I guess 2 decks worth of cards. I don't know how they're split up.
Yeah, we'll just keep them 52 is the same.
Great. So
why not?
Who knows how many? Roughly 52 over there, I suppose. All right. Oh, wonderful. So you just because this was mentioned before we started recording, you audit cards. Is that right? What's the right term? Analyze.
U.S. Playing Card Company is the largest maker of cards in the United States. Mm-hmm. And they just merged with Cardamundi, which is the biggest card maker. They've started making cards 1765, and U.S. Playing Card Company since 18. They've been around for 150 years. Mm-hmm. And Bicycle is the most recognized pack of cards in the world. Mm-hmm. It has been for over 100 years. And in 1988, I got some cards. They were so bad. I told them, these are not the cards you've been making. I can prove that you are subcontracting your paper out, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they sent a rep. I proved it, and they said he was been proven right. Then in 1993, they started miscutting their cards. I turned the things over. I said, these are not the cards you've been making for 100 years. I can prove it. And at that time, they were getting flack from the casinos because the casinos were not happy with the cards. There was something wrong with them. And I'm the one that identified the problem. And that was the blade was going through the wrong side of the card, which affected the integrity of the card and the ability for it to properly be handled properly. And so then they finally put me on retainer in the 1990s. And I helped them make the best card in the world. And they do make the best cards in the world. And just to give you an idea how far their director of research and development would push me, he would send me out, okay, usually it was 24 decks or like 20 decks.
Yeah.
But I'll make it real small so you can understand. Let's say 6 decks. Okay. So it would be, if it was 24, there would be 12 pairs. Okay, 12 pairs. So we reduce our illustration to down to 6 decks. There's 3 pairs, and one of the decks.
3 pairs of decks.
Three pairs. Yeah. 6 cards, 6 decks, which is 3 pairs. Yeah. Okay, so we're down to 6 decks, which would be 3 pairs. And then when I say pairs, each pair was ran together. That was a particular run of that deck. Okay. Okay. And so they would say one of the decks, they just changed one of the chemicals in the coating. This was probably the most elaborate one that I did. Yeah. Just one of the chemicals was changed, not the whole chemical, not the whole process. One of the chemicals was changed in their coating. And so not only did I have to say deck 1 and 3 are a match, 2 and 4 are a match, and 5 and 6 are a match. Uh-huh. And it was 5 and 6 that had the chemical change. And so not only did I, and they had those cards coded. When I say coded, they had a secret code like Q752916J, which that was their key in Cincinnati to understand these 2 are the pair, these 2 are the pair, these 2 are the pair. I did not have the key. Right. You know, but I just had these random numbers that I'd put down in my report. My son Asa would tell me, well, this one, Dad, is J752. This one is 67J4, and which meant absolutely nothing to me. And then I'd find out the 67J4 and whatever they were the match, and so I'd have to pair them up, match them up, and then analyze the snap, the embossing depth, the cut, the caliper, what I call the right period, and all these things, and which one is a better card. And to help, and they would take that information and fine-tune their machines to help, make the cards that they make, which are by far the finest cards you can buy.
They're now in use. Yeah. So I know we have just a little bit of time left, and we're practically neighbors since you're in San Antonio.
Right. We're down the
very,
street.
very close by. I'm curious to know. And this is sometimes a difficult question, but I'll ask 1 or 2 more questions. If you could put a message, a quote, anything non-commercial on a billboard to get a message out to millions or billions of people, is there anything that comes to mind that you might put on that billboard?
Yeah, in America we have opportunities. Success depends upon the use we make of those opportunities. That would be one. Another would be not going down.
Not going down.
Not going down. Another one would be consider every obstacle, as I mentioned, every obstacle, challenge, hurt, pain in your life as part of the adventure of life. That's what gives life spice. And then circling back to when I was talking about the surgeries, and my career was almost at an end. I was at Penn and Teller's theater. I was going to be on their show, their 4th season, and 3rd season. And I was in the gym, the Rio gym, where else, with my friend Doug Gorman. And I said, okay, I paid $17 for my workout. And I thought, that's a ridiculous workout, Paris. And so as soon as I got in there, one of those benches that you set them up like this, like you're doing standing curls,
right.
or you're sitting in curls, or you can recline it back for like triceps, or lay it all the way back. If you want to do sit-ups on there,
right.
or
adjustable bench.
Adjustable bench. And it was propped like this.
At about 45 degrees.
At 45 degree angle. And I pulled that pin, I couldn't get it to go down. And I felt it was butted up against the wall. Huh. And so I took that bench and I moved it over like this, and wham! My thumb was here, and it was those commercial grade benches. God. The steel bars that went right around here, and the steel bars that was the frame of the bench just came down and crushed my thumb. What did I do? I know he's crazy, and your people that are listening and watching say, yeah, he's a little on the crazy side. And okay, don't let me get off track on here. But did you know I'm a certified oddball?
A certified oddball? I
am certified.
I did see your card.
Yeah. I'll explain. You've heard of Ripley's Believe It or Not, right?
Yes.
In 1984, I was on the TV series Ripley's Believe It or Not, hosted by Jack Palance. I'm also an exhibit in the second largest Ripley's in the country, and I'm in the 2015 issue of Ripley's Believe It or Not Book of Eye-Poppin' Oddities. Where I received a certificate. Certified. I am a certified oddity. So you might be an oddball, Tim. I'm certified.
You're certified.
I'm a certified oddball.
Okay, so this contraption comes crashing
crushed
down.
My thumb. And I called Doug. I said, bring me a bucket of ice and don't ask any questions. And I figured I saved $17 for this workout. I'm not going to. So I had ice for 3 minutes, worked out for 3 minutes. Ice for 3 minutes, worked out for 3 minutes. Finished my workout. Oh my gosh, my thumb was as big as my big toe. I ran upstairs, grabbed my cards and went, oh my gosh, I can't feel it. So I called the producers, Lincoln and Andrew. They were the executive producers of the show. I said, Link, I had a little trouble. A bench crushed my thumb. I think I could do the first and third part of what we rehearsed, but I don't think I can do the second. And he said, get down here. He says, you're going to the emergency room. And they sent me to the emergency room, and they got in there, and the first thing they did is they poked a hole in it. They said a fountain of blood shot out. I ended up having to go into surgery. And because I thought this may be the end of my career, and Luke and the boys were flying in to get some footage with Penn and Teller for Delt, and they were in air when this happened. So they land thinking they're coming in to film Penn and Teller, and about whatever they were going to ask them, only to find out that I just got crushed. And instead, they're filming me showing my thumb that's every shade of black and blue, but the color it's supposed to be. Anyway, so I ended up in surgery, and I thought, okay, if this is the end of my life, I don't want to be out. I told the surgeon, I don't want to be out. I want fully conscious. I've went through multiple surgeries, and I'll just shuffle the cards with my other hand while you work on this one, and that'll be my anesthetic. And so he thought I was nuts, and you can watch it. And I said, I want to film it too. So if this is the end of my career, I want footage. And so they said, okay, well, you just put our anesthesiologist out of business. He can film it. And you can go on YouTube. It's Crush Dealing Thumb feature and Crush Dealing Thumb. One is the short version, one's long version. It's on YouTube. Crush Dealing Thumb is the way you look it up. But I have to warn you, it's graphic, because he takes a spoon and pops my thumb open like a hood of a car. Ugh. Then he takes it, he cuts it open, and he's squeezing the butt, and we're talking the whole time back and forth, and I'm shuffling cards, and they go back and forth, shuffle, and the thumb, and we're talking about all this, and I said, man, this is so cool. And he goes, why don't people want to do this? He says, they go schizoid. People go schizophrenic when they go through something like this. And he said, I had to be totally unconscious before I did it. I just had a hangnail bruise. This is the hand doctor talking. Yeah. Anyway, but that gets back to, I am a certified oddball.
So you have your thumb popped open like the hood of the car, and we'll link to those videos in the show notes at Tim.blog, so people will be able to find all of those videos. And what happened after that? Did you meet with Penn and Teller? Or?
Yeah, when I went, Lincoln and Andrew said, you'll come back for our 4th season. Don't worry about it right now. Take care of your thumb. It literally took, to the day, before my thumbnail came back, because they didn't know if it was going to take, or I grew out another one, or I was going to end up with no thumbnail at all. Fortunately, I grew out a new one. And it was literally Friday before that my manicurist finally got the last part of the wiggly, woggly looking thumbnail to be matched up. And I went on and I started the filming on the following Monday. So it took almost a year to the day. And so I got on their show and had a blast. It was, and I fooled them faster than anybody in the history of their show, because, and it was really fun. And Penn and Teller are just amazing performers. They are just top notch. And Teller is so funny, and people don't realize it. And if you watch it on the show, and I'm told this afterwards, he was staring at what I'm doing, and he's trying to signal, bring down the trophy now. And over the headpiece, he's been told, don't bring down the trophy. We want Richard to do his entire act. And then beforehand, they said, Richard, you got to tell us how you do this so we can make a judgment. This is their judges, Johnny Thompson and Michael Close. I said, well, Dai Vernon and I are the only ones that really knows this stuff. We know that. We got to make some judgment. I said, okay, watch. I showed them in slow motion what I was doing. I showed, and they go, my God, it really is impossible. And so then what Penn hears over his head, and this is what I was told, is he stood up. I was supposed to have a 6-minute interview with Allison while they discussed how to do it. And then, of course, they had it down to 1 minute when it broadcasts. And they go, they said over the head, don't ask us, we don't know how the hell he did it. And so then Penn turns around and says, we have nothing to say. You fooled us. And then the cool part was, I walk off stage with Penn, and I hear this, and this is exactly how you talk. Richard, F. I said, who's that? It's me, Teller. He said, it was so wonderful to be so completely and thoroughly astonished. I've never seen anything like that in my life. And I thought, they said, let's get some selfies. And then the really fun thing was at midnight, I get a call. They said, Teller wants to know if we can come up and get a signed deck of cards from you. I said, this is backwards. I'm supposed to ask enough for autographs from them. And I said, does Penn want one too? They said, oh, Penn would love it. Anyway, so that was kind of a really cool thing. And like I said, they're extraordinarily talented and extraordinary talents. And I was so honored that they dealt, and that Teller actually wrote on the film posters.
Oh yeah,
that
one of the blurbs.
Theaters. Yeah,
very well earned.
Yeah,
and the entire story. I mean, this is a perfect way to wrap up, because that entire story makes me think back to Tony Giorgio early on. And what was he saying? Don't make the money.
Won't get the money.
Won't get the money. Now later though,
in 2000.
What did he say?
In 2001, I just finished my show at the Castle, and there's Tony. And he and I battled each other for 25 years. And they said, Richard, Tony's here to see you. And there was what's called the Vernon seats, where Vernon had one corner, and that's where Tony was seated, because Vernon had passed away 10 years before. And they had one seat across, waiting for me to sit down. All these top card guys are standing there waiting. They want another battle between Giorgio and Tony, Giorgio and Turner. They always have these showdowns like gunfighters. And so I didn't want to have any part of it. And I said, no, I'll just stand. For an hour, they finally said, Richard, Tony was waiting. And finally, I thought to myself, you know what? Tony was mean and hard on me, but I have to credit at least half of my accomplishments to him being my antagonist. And I thought, okay. And I said, Tony, I just want to thank you for all your years of encouragement. You were hard on me. You were divisive at times, but people respect you because you knew the real work, and you could do the real work. And because you pushed me hard, you made me better. And I wanted to thank you for that. And he goes, why, thank you, Richard. That's very nice of you. Did you ever get that center deal down? And of course, he knew I did. I said, would you mind showing us? So now I sit down now for the next 2.5 hours. We're doing what everybody wanted to see. And after every thing, he turned to us, that'll get the money. That'll get the money. And then he actually proposed. He said, we have the perfect scam, the perfect threesome. He said, I'll tell the people you're a high-stake gambler, but you can't see, but you would love to play Hold'em. I'll be the person that reads the cards to you. He said, there's not 5 people in the gaming world that understands your work. He said, we have a third agent, third part of the crew that you'll deal the good hands to. And so from the guy who said never get the money, actually proposed us putting together as a team and hustling together. And then I actually have a handwritten letter, 5-page handwritten letters, one of my best treasures from Tony Giorgio. And then emails that say, love Tony at the end of it. So it went from won't get the money to just talking nasty and mean, and times at the castle he would have to be taken out of the castle in ways wasn't pleasant to him, to becoming a very dear friend. And I actually had the privilege of writing one for one of the magazines, his obituary, because I had a 39-year relationship with him, from fighting to earning his respect. And really quickly, that came from my first director, a man named Steve Terrell, who was a TV and movie star back in the 50s and early 60s. And I was in the theater company called the Lambs Players from 1972 to 78. And one of the things he would tell me is on stage, he'd watch me, and I'd be looking out of the corner of my eye. Remember we talked about that? So I had no forward vision. So I'm talking to my character, and I'm looking over here. He said, Richard, you need to, it looks odd for you looking off to the side. I know that you can't see where the shadow is unless you turn your head to the side. He said, just look at the voice. And he taught me how to square my head towards the voice and give the impression that I could see them. He said, you've seen an actor will play the part of a blind person. You flip the roles. You're a blind person. You play the part of a sighted person. And he said, he says, he was watching me practicing before and after every scene. He says, you love cards. If you become the best card man in the world, you will earn the respect of your worst enemies. And then that was the case with Tony Giorgio. He was the guy who was an enemy. He was my nightmare every time I went to the castle, if we ran into each other, to becoming a very dear man.
And I mean, that sounds like another billboard. So if I could put up a billboard for you, that's what it would say. That'll get the money. That'll get the money. Yeah. And this has been so fun. We didn't even get into your hustling stories, and this entire prep has been an embarrassment of riches. So I hope this isn't the last time that I see you. Hopefully we get to spend some more time together.
You name it, or if I'm up here, I'll let you know I'm coming. Yeah. Anytime you want to visit or do something again, I'm at it'd be my honor and privilege to hang out together, even if it's to go have a protein shake.
Protein shake, or maybe I can just get my ass handed to me in the gym, or maybe a bit of both. And what a pleasure to spend time with you, finally in person, which I've wanted for so long. And people can find out all about you, Richard Turner 52, the number 52, richardturner52.com, on social, and I'll link to all of these in the show notes as well. youtube.com/ASAT52, that's ASAT52, and then also youtube.com/Richard Turner 52. We'll link to all of this. For speaking, you're repped by APB Speaking Bureau.
Right, American Program Bureau, APB, and that's one of my favorite things to do now is, for some reason, people are inspired, and my wife says, people want to hear your story. And I always want to just be an entertainer. But I have to say, I'm really blessed that I have the privilege of speaking and entertaining some of the most amazing companies on the planet.
And I can't wait to see what you do next. You are also, of course, featured in Dealt, which has, at least last I checked, a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. And
5-star.
It is one of my favorite documentaries I've seen in certainly the last 5 years. It's just spectacular. And I am greatly inspired by you, slightly terrified of you. And I look forward to watching your further ongoing adventures, and hope to have a protein shake in the near future. But thanks very much for coming. Really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, Tim. It was a pleasure being with you, and I'm honored as well. Thank you, sir.
And for everybody watching or listening, we will have a lot to link to in the show notes, and many resources. We also have, of course, the video if you're listening via audio, which you can check out at youtube.com/Tim Ferriss, or just go to tim.blog and you'll find it there. And for the show notes, all the links, just go to tim.blog/podcast, type in Richard Turner, and bam, lickety split, you'll have what you need. And until next time, be safe, train hard, practice perfectly if you're going to practice, and thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.